So, good morning, everybody. My name is Roberto Zangrandi. I'm the Secretary General with ENTSO for Smart Grids in Brussels. And we are here for the third edition of our cybersecurity seminar, as every year in the past three. And we are happy to be able to have organized that also this year. The coronavirus notwithstanding, thanks to the help of these platforms. I wish you welcome, everybody, and this is going to be an interesting session. Cybersecurity, data sharing. And this is the first of two seminars. The second will be on the 21st of October, and will be hosted and chaired by ENTSO-E. We all partner with ENCS, which is the beacon of cybersecurity for transmission and distribution grids in Europe, as you all well know. So we shall be hosting leading cybersecurity experts from the European institution and the grid operator community, and public organizations, industry, and everybody that is gathering today, just to have a report on the emerging threats and the best of the technologies that are set in place to manage and contrast them. Let me first draw your attention on some housekeeping rule for this seminar. So video and audio is allowed only for speakers or panelists. The speakers will be asked to switch video and audio off when not talking. As far as the participant questions is concerned, the participants can place their question directly through GoToWebinar, through the application, where I will see these questions coming, and will use them to animate the debate or to stimulate the answers from the panelists. Indicate your name and company while putting the question, so it is easier to identify the context from where the question is coming from. Those questions that might leave unanswered will be replied after the conference by the experts on a personal basis. Chat and raise the hand feature will not be used. We are a lot of people around this conference. We are 180 in this right moment, still rising. So, as a convenience for all of you, we reminded at the bottom of each slide the Twitter handles and hashtags that are concerned to the speaker in that moment and to the event itself. As you know, Twitter is the best way to convey your opinion to the public about this thing. Feel free to tweet as of moment number one. Can we then start? And the agenda is on the website. We shall have relevant people that I will introduce as they come. So can we go to my first slide, please? Yes. So this is something that I inserted in the very last moment. This sector is no new on cybersecurity. This is the third seminar managed between TSOs and DSOs. But this journey started 9 years ago, right after the foundation of EBSO. We stimulated the first meetings and the first reflections from the Commission on the issue of cybersecurity. We started with a thorough meeting with Viviane Reding, at that time Vice President of the European Commission, And from that on, we started our effort and our mission in sensibilizing about the cybersecurity and data protection with the Commission and with the services of the Commissions, along with other relevant stakeholders. You see, the papers have got a totally another format if you consider the current format of the papers from the institution. And this is a little bit of archaeology, even if it is only 9 years away, but that's where we as EDSO started. And that's where EDSO started its concern and its endeavor in favor of the grid distributors in connection with the transmission grid operators to improve the grids. We are now in the 10th year of our association. We shall celebrate this in 10 days. And now I wish you a very interesting seminar. So I have got the honor to ask for the keynote address Katarina Sikov-Magni, Director Internal Energy Market of DG Energy at the European Commission. Katarina is connected per audio because the cybersecurity provisions of the Commission do really prevent her from using external applications. So, Katarina, you are in the right place. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Roberto. And I'm not sure if I managed to get the video connection work as well. Yeah, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very pleased to be here today to discuss with you the very important issues related to cybersecurity and data. I mean, they are very topical, and I'm very glad also to see that this event has been organized jointly by so many associations and organizations. That shows the good cooperation. From the Commission side, as you certainly know, we have declared the goal to make Europe the world's first climate neutral continent by 2050. And 3 weeks ago, the Commission proposed a new target climate plan, which aims at reducing greenhouse gases by 55% by 2030 already. Given that energy production accounts for 75% of EU's emissions, we really need to ensure that we bring about our contribution to the transition. For such a just and green transition, it is paramount that Europeans have access to affordable, secure, reliable, and clean energy. So the energy system integration, regional connectivity, well-regulated energy markets, innovation, and energy security are key elements in achieving these goals. So getting there on time will require the extensive use of information technologies, big data, artificial intelligence, the Internet of Things, and the like. Digitalization will make not only the grids smarter, but it will also be required to protect, inform, and empower consumers. Digitalization of the energy sector is connecting the European Commission's objective of a Europe fit for the digital age to the European Green Deal. So bringing new business opportunities and strengthening a European technological leadership. As regards cybersecurity, so besides, of course, all the advantages of digitalization, it also represents challenges for the energy sector. And this is the question of cyber. Especially in times of COVID, this is even more important as we are all working remotely and the risks for cyber issues are, of course, increasing in that context. So we need to be sure that we are well prepared. We have seen recently various types of cyber attacks, but we have also seen that the electricity sector, for instance, has been able to counteract in these respects because of being well prepared and having good design for cross-border risk management and preparedness. But let me recall that the energy sector has particularities that create specific challenges and requires specific cybersecurity solutions, notably when it comes to real-time requirements, cascading effect, and the mix of legacy technologies with smart or state-of-the-art technology. So this is addressed in the Energy Security Union strategy that the Commission adopted in July 2020. This strategy seeks to respond to both internal and external threats and puts forward new rules to protect and increase the resilience of the physical and digital infrastructures. The strategy also highlights the need for two sector-specific actions in the energy area. Firstly, an initiative to protect and improve the resilience of critical energy infrastructure will be considered in the upcoming policy regarding the protection of critical energy infrastructure. So this work is underway and we are working with stakeholders and Commission colleagues to ensure a good approach for protecting critical infrastructures. Second, we have already started the work in which many of you take part to prepare a network code on cybersecurity for cross-border electricity flows. So this work is underway and emphasizes, its urgency and importance is emphasized in the Security Union, and that's why we have indeed accelerated the work together with you. Connected to the cybersecurity issues, ENTSO-E is currently implementing a toolbox thanks to support from the Connecting Europe facility that would allow to increase cybersecurity protection and optimize operation of grid. This work is ongoing and together with the network code should be implemented by end of 2021. In relation to protection of critical infrastructure, it is also important and urgent to look at the NIS directive, which is under revision by the end of the year and will impact the digitalization of the energy sector, covering thousands of smaller operators and millions of consumers. This work builds on, among others, on the recommendation on cybersecurity that was adopted already in April 2019 to help member states address also smaller operators that might represent the weaker link. If I then move to data issues, so further, the handling of the exchange of big data in a safe and regulatory compliant way is of utmost importance to ensure trust. The European data strategy underlines the importance of handling and sharing data in accordance with EU values, which are respecting privacy, data protection rights, and based on secure infrastructure and trusted value chains. All this contributing to sustainability. So access, trust, interoperability are the prerequisites to ensure that data can flow in a simple, safe, and secure manner. The GDPR, so the famous General Data Protection Regulation, is the umbrella legislation that is applied to all the handling of personal data electronically, regardless of the size, function, and these focuses on the protection. It is also the key to build trust, which is essential. The new electricity directive that is being transposed by member states as we speak, explicitly states that member states must put in place transparent, non-discriminatory rules for access to data. Moreover, they need to ensure cybersecurity and data protection, as well as impartiality of the entities that process the data. In this light, the new electricity directive sets security requirements for smart metering and the data communication it supports. So our ambitious climate objectives make the topic of global supply chains even more important. Certain technologies for renewable energy, storage, or the electricity grid are particularly dependent on external suppliers. This is why the EU's new growth strategy, the European Green Deal, recognizes access to resources as a critical question to meet EU's decarbonization targets. This managing reliable supply chains is a key element that contributes to the EU's strategic autonomy and indirectly also relates to cybersecurity and data questions. Thankfully, the pandemic did not cause energy supply disruptions in the EU, but it has exposed us to some vulnerabilities in our supply chains. And therefore, we are looking into how to make sure also that we can ensure resilience in these critical supply chains. Let me then finalize my introductory remarks by underlining that cybersecurity is essential for having safe, secure, and sustainable energy in the future. Strong cybersecurity in the energy sector will contribute to keep prices down for consumers because it will enable and trust and make sure that consumers are ready and willing to use all the new technologies and the new tools that we want to offer them. Cybersecurity will also increase the use of clean energy by allowing aggregation of data, by allowing access to flexibility markets, etc. And it will therefore make energy supply more reliable and secure. I thank you for your attention and wish you a very good discussion today. Thank you.
Thank you, Katarina. It is us thanking you for your contribution and for the time you have taken here. You have in front of you 200 plus members of our community very much committed to keep the adequate pace in the evolution not only of cybersecurity but also of all digitalized energy-related techniques, and that will be the report that you can draw from the contribution of the others and the contribution of the others that will be duly noted by your staff around this conference as well. Thank you very much for being with us, and have a good insulated job at the Commission. It's hard for everybody, but I believe that you are doing a great job in under these circumstances. Have a good day, Katarina, and thank you very much. So, ladies and gentlemen, we are over 230 around the conference in this moment. I would like to invite to take the floor Franz Strempfel. Franz is a vice chair of the board of EDSO, a long-lasting member of us, and he is the managing director of Energienetze Steiermark, an important DSO in Steiermark in Austria. And Franz is also very much active at the helm of the Austrian Association of DSO. Franz, thank you very much for being there. Please, you have the floor. You can have a word on the daily life facing cybersecurity for a DSO in your situation and in your dimension. Please.
Thank you very much, Roberto, for the nice words. Ladies and gentlemen, it is a great pleasure for me to give the opening speech here at this webinar on behalf of ENTSO. And it is very good for me to hear that my company is a very important DSO in Austria. The Clean Energy Package has established a new framework towards a customer-centric and sustainable energy system. But it also considers the importance of cybersecurity to the energy sector. Can you switch to the next slides, please? I will give you a short introduction to ENTSO. I think you already know a lot of the association. Then we will have a look at the energy transition and to the challenges for the DSOs. And then just a few words on the code of cybersecurity we will talk about in the coming hours. ENTSO represents DSOs, but DSOs which are 100% legal unbundled. And these companies covers more than 90% of the renewable resources which are connected to that grid and which are channeled through the DSO grids. We have more than 40 members in our association, and these 40 members covers more than 350 million of customers. And we are running and operating 7 million kilometers of distribution lines. Coming to the challenges of the energy transition, we all know that DSOs are in the middle of the market design and what will be coming and what will be happening. The energy production will become decentralized. It will be switched from conventional generation to renewables, and this will bring more fluctuation to the power flows in our grid. It will be our goal to run and operate the grid in a stability, in a stable manner, and maintain security of supply, and to handle all these congestions. And therefore, we will implement smart solutions that will be needed to guarantee security of supply also in the future. It was the Clean Energy Package which puts the customer at the center. And if we put the customer to the center, also the DSO will be put to the center, because almost all customers and almost all generators, the new generators, the renewable generators, are connected to the distribution grid. And this will increase the challenges for the DSO as well. So what is the stake we are facing? We already talked about the renewable integration to the grid. Therefore, we will have to implement new smart solutions for the handling of the flexibility, but also to make a huge grid enforcement as well. Electrification is on the plan, not only for e-mobility, but also for heating and for cooling, for example. We have to incentivize customers to be more active to the systems, to help to run and operate the system in a secure manner, and therefore we have to work together with the customers who are now, not only now, but also in the future, in the center of our system. And this all will bring a growing complexity to the system. We have to run and operate the grid, and we have to share a lot of data in order to get the things done. So not only the DSOs are running and operate the grids where almost all customers are connected, we are also managing the data exchange with all market participants, not only with the customers, but also with the other DSOs and TSOs. So big data has to be shared in order to run and operate the system in a very secure manner, and on the other hand, to share the data with all the customers, with the prosumers, and with new actors on the market, who will run new market models and will help to solve and run the system in the future. When it comes to data exchange, then there is a problem to solve. Can you press just one button? We have to harmonize the way how the data will be exchanged. And to do this, the most important thing is to harmonize processes, data formats, and communication protocols. If you do that, it is easy to implement a system which makes it possible to share the data with a lot of market participants. Sorry, but that is a solution we implemented already in Austria. It is called the Energy Data Exchange in Austria. We are running this system together, all DSOs and the TSOs, and it is open to all market participants at different levels. Next slide, please. Next one, please. Yeah, this one. We started the implementation in 2006 to exchange electronic invoices. We have already implemented the switching process, the share of the smart metering data, and we are now want to use the systems together with the TSO to implement a flexibility sharing process all over the market in Austria. And if you manage it to make standardization, it is not necessary to implement a central hub. You can do it in a decentralized way, which makes it a lot cheaper. Next slide, please. So the network code for cybersecurity is the system operators are already working on together with, to establish this network code. And we pointed out 4 clear objectives. First, protect the energy system. Second one, support the functioning of the system for the European society and the economy in this crisis time. Create trust and transparency for cybersecurities and harmonize maturity and resilience across Europe with a defined minimum level. This brings opportunities, but also responsibilities to the system operators to maintain security of supply. Next slide, please. Our role is about data because customers are connected to our grids, and the role of the amount of data is evolving rapidly due to the new technology advances. New actors are coming into the market, and the volume of data that TSO has to manage and the number of parties we have to work with is rising immediately. But TSOs are able and used to manage these data because they were even in the past responsible for metering data. And since the rollout of smart meter, we are used to collect data, validating data, managing and providing data to the customers and ensuring data privacy to all customers which are working with us. One important thing is digital resilience and cybersecurity by design. This has to be considered because we have a huge technology mix in our system, coming from the legacy components we already have implemented and new IoT devices which have to be put together, and these IoT devices may not made with cybersecurity in mind. That is why the new network code will not only establish a set of roles for harmonized minimum level defense, but will promote a higher maturity, not only to us, to the system operator, but also to the grid users. Next slide, please. Ladies and gentlemen, let's transform together the conventional old system into the new secure system, the future system, which can be called also web of energy. Thank you very much. Roberto.
So I'm so sorry. I couldn't reactivate the microphone. Thank you very much, Franz. You went a little bit long, but it was extremely interesting. 30 seconds to answer a question that we have for you here, and it is the following. Can you describe in a tiny hazelnut shell the status of the data sharing among DSO and TSO in Austria? This is a question from the public.
We had concerning that, we had a long and a very strong discussion with our TSO regarding the implementation of the system operator guidelines, for example. But at the end, this summer, we agreed on the system, how we can do that, active system management. And now we made a suggestion to our regulator in order to get the things done.
Okay. I hope this is satisfactory for about the question. Thank you very much again, Franz. And now let me give you the floor to Guido Guida. Guido is a member of the board and chair of the digital committee of ENTSO-E, our friends from the transmission system operators, and is also responsible for international institutional affairs at Terna. Terna is the Italian TSO. Guido, you have got the floor, please.
So thank you very much, Roberto. Good morning to everybody. I hope you hear me well. As you said, Roberto, I'm representing ENTSO-E that covers 42 European TSOs. So I will not go through describing ENTSO-E, but next slide, please. I'm going to give an overview on, according to us, what are the issues on cybersecurity. So when we talk about cybersecurity, we must always refer to digitalization. To develop the internal energy market and to achieve the objective of decarbonization. So this means also a higher degree of the decentralization. We must refer to digitalization. So there has been a significant development in recent years, but even more is expected in the years to come. As you can see in the slide, in particular on the left part, the future is represented by integration with the other sectors, and digitalization is the one that allows to enable more and more interactions, faster and faster exchange, and even more overcome boundaries and silos. And so this is enabled by interoperability. This means cross-site processes, data sharing among different procedures and parties. So and all these obviously increase the cybersecurity risk that cannot be overlooked. So when we speak about digitalization, we have to put together interoperability and cybersecurity. Look at the castle represented in this slide. So it is an isolated system, well protected from external attacks. Now we should imagine to move from that solid and isolated structure into a glass house where people can move freely from one floor to another, creating, on one hand, business value, but also, on the other hand, to create opportunities for nasty people that would like to enter in this common house. This risk obviously increase proportionally with the level of the interoperability of the systems. So each time you create a breach, you create an opportunity for attackers, and obviously at the same time the attackers will benefit from this situation. This is the context in which we move. The European grid becomes more and more interconnected, interdependent. This critical infrastructure becomes more important for society because interconnection and interdependence can result in cascading effect, which gives cybersecurity risks for the whole European system. Therefore, there is a need for an harmonized maturity and resilience for cybersecurity across Europe, with defined minimal level favoring at the same time higher degrees of maturity. So as I said, the energy transition is also about the decentralized energy resources and demand. And this means that we are connecting many stakeholders and digital systems to our system, which gives obviously a large attack surface. Therefore, TSOs and DSOs are relevant from a perspective of business critical processes. Then the point is how to manage the cybersecurity risk and to guarantee the resilience of our services. I think that we can speak about the three keywords that are represented by standardization, common rules, but also to push for investment. So standardization has been said also by Caterina, by Sico, and also by the previous speaker. So the need is to have a system secure and resilient where prevention controls are performed and operated in compliance to standards. So this is I would like to emphasize. So we need to ensure standard of exchange among all parties. Transmission system operators on their side worked in the past year on it, and we have developed a system among us with standard exchange, not only among us, but also with the regional security centers. Now the must is to be able to allow that all these standards are applicable among all other operators. The other point is represented by the common rules. So if I go back to the previous similitude I used, the ones of the castle, we are in a common house, and we all have to collaborate and to operate. If we have a common house, each party should enforce the security of their doors and windows, and we have to consider to take into account that the hacker will always choose the weakest access of the common house. So in a complex interoperable systems as the ones we are managing today, but we are going to manage in the future, the overall security is given by the security of the weakest link, and it could put the whole system at risk. So it's necessary to have a security posture of the ones who participate in the shared system, and so this should be defined and standardized. An adequate level of cybersecurity should be achieved by all participants. So you must be strong, but in a connected system, if even one is not, everyone is at a risk. And so we need, in this case, clear and shared rules. And for this reason, we welcome and the cybersecurity network code for cross-border electricity flows, as said by the European Commission with the Clean Energy Package. We are ready to cooperate and contribute in writing this network code and bring the community to the next level in terms of resilience. For us, it's very important that we need the cyber security certification of products and digital services, as well as rules and cooperation from everyone. And in this aspect, I think that the Cybersecurity Act mentioned by Caterina represents a very important step forward in order to increase the resilience of our services. So either the level is raised for everyone and uniformity is shared, or on the other hand, if everyone goes on its own way or the rules are not clear, there is no more control. Accident can still occur, but you need to be sure that you're able to handle them without any impact on the core services. So in a complex system, I repeat, it's necessary that everyone is prepared to face and guarantee the resilience of the overall system. So let's define the level and determine where we want to put it. Then the other point I would like to mention is the need for investment of cybersecurity. So it must be clear then when we talk about digitalization, cybersecurity is an integrating and a fundamental part of it. As necessary to expect, operators must be aware of it. This is very important. And this is, let me say, it's very clear from the European institutions with this recovery package that are pushing for digitalization. And we are very happy that 20% of the funds, the funds under recovery and resilience facility will be made available for the digital transition. And so we expect to have investment also on cybersecurity. It's important to invest on technology in order to guarantee the highest level of protection of our data and our digital services. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Guido. It's been as clear as always, your contribution. Of course, there's no need to remind that the recovery plan will devote to digitalization 1/5 of the funding, and that digitalization widespread also in our sectors will require the highest standard of cybersecurity. Thank you very much for the contribution. Thank you for the job that you are doing in this respect. And thank you for having taken the time to be with us today.
Thank you very much, Roberto. Bye-bye to everybody.
Yeah, ciao Guido. Let me now give the floor to Saad Kadi. Saad is the head of CERT EU, so the certification unit of the Commission, and he is proposing a keynote with quite, let's say, a fizzy title: Sharing is Caring or Scaring? Strategies for combating cyber attacks. I'm looking very much forward to your intervention, Saad. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Roberto, for having me. Welcome to the audience. Indeed, I will speak about a different kind of sharing here, which is sharing data related to threat and cyber attacks. So it will be highly cybersecurity, threat intelligence oriented talk. So please put up with me. Can I have the presenter mode so I can present my slides, please? Thank you. Okay. You should be seeing my slides. So indeed, the title is, as Roberto said, quite fuzzy. Sharing is caring, or is it sharing is scaring? So let me first introduce briefly who we are at CERT EU. Then I will move to the building blocks of what I believe to be a solid threat data sharing related to cyber attacks. And then I'll cover challenges related to building a program, and I will finish by brushing open a dream of mine, so you learn about that. So briefly, who we are CERT-EU. We are based in Brussels, and we are a NEO entity that is administratively hosted in the European Commission, but provide cybersecurity services to all the EU institutions, bodies, agencies. So we have more than 80 constituents spread all over Europe, and with a few, I would say, constituents that are out of Europe. There are mainly civilian missions of the European External Action Service, for example, in countries such as Libya, Palestine, and others. And our constituent, the EU institutions, bodies, and agencies, as you certainly know, work in various sectors. So ranging, for example, in the banking sector, we have EIB or ECB, to the energy sector, pharmaceutical, food, law enforcement, research, and so on and so forth. And we have a memorandum of understanding with Europol, with the European Defence Agency, EDA, and last but not least with ENISA, the EU Agency for Cybersecurity, with whom we have a structured cooperation going on in the remit of the Cybersecurity Act. And we act as the incident response team for all these EU institutions, bodies, and agencies, but also act as the cybersecurity information exchange hub among these entities in peers and partners, whether in the member states or elsewhere. So data sharing, in particular threat sharing, is at the heart of our daily job. So now let me move to the building blocks of what I consider to be a proper threat sharing program. But let me remind the audience here why sharing is so important, and particularly those among you who have been living in caves for the 10 last years without electricity or any lights. So as you certainly know that you came out of your caves and see the word, well, we have COVID-19 pandemic. That's a new thing that has been forced down our throat earlier this year. But other than that, the cyber threat landscape has been continuously evolving in the last 10 years or so. And the attack surface has been growing. And that's partly thanks to the COVID, or because of the COVID-19 pandemic, since teleworking became the norm, and basically assets north and west have been exposed on the internet to allow businesses to continue to do their jobs. So I here mention particularly the, for example, the applications that were inside our kind of firewalls and have had to be published on the internet, sometimes without a due penetration testing or vulnerability assessment, and which kind of like give new doors, new opportunities for attackers to exploit them. And there are many types of attacks that are rampant. I would mention targeted intrusions that have been increasing and now customary, but also ransomware attacks. So as you might have read in the news 2 weeks ago, or 3 weeks, I don't remember clearly, but there is the first death that we can account for of a person in a hospital in Germany due to a ransomware attack. And we at CERT-EU, we create a threat landscape report, a quarterly product, and for many years now. And we've seen that in Q3, the number of ransomware attacks in Europe has more than tripled in comparison to Q2. There is also a very worrisome trend that has been popping up for the last 2 or 3 years, is that we see cyber criminal groups starting to adopt playbooks from nation-state threat actors. So make no mistake, threat actors collaborate and have been doing so very, very efficiently for a long, long time. And I would say now that you have came out of your cave, fighting alone is not an option. If you think that you can pull out, I would say defending your asset against cyber attacks alone, that is not a strategy, that is wishful thinking. So with that being said, what are recipe for good sharing or threat sharing program? So you should take into account a threat model, data exchange, data sources, and tools. So what are threat models? So the first thing you should have, if you don't have it already, is to construct a threat model that corresponds to your organization profile. And how do you go by constructing a threat model? So first, you need to understand what are your crown jewels. Again, I would say, reassuring or not, you're not going to be able to protect everything. You're not going to be able to kind of like keep at bay all the threats. However, you should concentrate whatever resources you have on your crown jewels. And then if you have extra resources, then you can extend, I would say, that scope to other, I would say, sensitive areas of your IT assets and IT environment. Once you identify your crown jewels, whatever you need to protect and monitor, you need to understand who might go after them, how they can get access to those crown jewels. For example, do they just need to send a phishing or COVID-19, for example, teamed phishing to an administrator who is still surfing the internet and reading their email from while connected as administration on their workstation in 2020, which is obviously something that should not be done at all. And once you identify the type of threat actors that might go after your precious crown jewels, you need to kind of like understand or profile them to the best extent possible. So you could use something like, for example, the attack framework, which is really helpful to jumpstart such threat models and profiling of threat actors. But you should not limit yourself to that, and should seek, I would say, information from your peers and partners on those threat actors that are of highest concern to you. Then you move kind of like to address your suppliers, because your suppliers could be used as a way into your network. Do they have a connection? Can they be targeted? And so on and so forth. Let me tell you that whatever, I would say, money you pour into constructing a threat model, it will never be perfect. So you should aim for good enough. That's something that is regularly updated and without being too narrow, because you will have surprises down the road, surprises that you will learn from, hopefully, and improve the threat model as you go. The second building block is data exchange. So you have on one side someone that is willing to give, I would say, threat information, threat data to you, and somebody that is willing to receive threat data, threat information from you. So the receiving end is the easiest part, because I would say everybody is willing to receive. But do they have the ability to use or to consume the data? Junior teams or like beginners in this area make, I would say, a very common mistake, is that the first thing they look for is indicators of compromise. So when they look for indicators of compromise, they usually go, for example, to hook themselves to a platform called MISP, the MISP previously called the Malware Information Sharing Platform of the Circle in Luxembourg. And it contains tons and tons of indicators of compromise. But usually these beginners or junior teams do not have a threat model. So they end up swamped by a ton of indicators that they are not able to consume, because they don't have necessarily the detection, I would say, means or just beginning that area. So it's usually just like burning fuel into that and getting disheartened. So the most important thing for the receiver or the recipient is the ability to use the data they receive, and they should filter that data using the threat model. So that's why threat models are extremely important. Now, moving on the giving end. So the giving end is always kind of like tricky because people are reluctant to share because they fear that if they share, I would say, information on attacks they have witnessed or they had, it might, I would say, come with reputational risk if that data is leaked, for example, to the press, or it may come with kind of like giving an edge to a competitor and things like that. And this is why trust is so vital into kind of like for this process to go. So I think we are all humans. We need to know each other. Sadly, with this kind of virtual world we now live in, with continuous meetings, it's difficult to do. However, I insist on the necessity to get to know your peers and partners, and take a leap of faith, of course, control a leap of faith to provide contextualized and necessary data for them to be able to detect and defend themselves against cyber attacks. Last but not least, the receiver should have the ability to give feedback on the data they receive, so the sender can, I would say, improve the quality of the data they provide. For example, avoid false positive, avoid having, for example, Google domain names there, etc. And that will kind of like increase the accuracy of their detection capability. The third building block is the sources. So going from more relevant to less relevant, instructed by your threat model, the top, I would say, number one source for threat data is your incident, and particularly your past incident. You have to learn from them, and basically those threat actors you have identified in your threat model, you should understand like what the modus operandi and try to protect against their future attacks. Of course, if you, for example, open source intelligence program, and you have good links with your national CSIRT, the Cybersecurity Incident Response team of your country, they will be able to provide, for example, notifications, or let you know, for example, if some of your data has been breached and has been exposed on Basebin, or you have had coded passwords, or I would say project names in GitHub, in other, I would say, channels. Next up, you should also kind of like liaise with your sector very, very closely, so that your peers can provide you, or your IAC, your Information Sharing Analysis Center, can provide you with useful information related to threats that might be of concern to you. Then you should move on to your suppliers, and there either have like something with them on the contract side, or you kind of like liaise with them fora such as FIRST, TFC CERT, or AID if you are in the Asia Pacific area. And if you have time, if you have the resources, you should definitely from time to time, not always, but from time to time, look at nearby close sectors and the rest of the world in order to understand if there are some threat information that is shared there that could be useful to you, or instruct the threat model in order to refine it down the road. Last but not least, the fourth building block for a good, solid threat sharing program are tools. Your toolset need to encompass three functions, in my opinion: the ability to produce indicators of compromise that help others defend themselves, or you to defend yourself in case you have an attack. And the tools, if possible, should also provide TTPs, or techniques, tactics, and procedures, but they are difficult to do. Your toolset should allow you to exchange those IOCs with your peers, partners, sectors, ISAC, etc., and national CSIRT, and TTPs again if possible, and should allow you to use this IOC. And this is where kind of the ability to use and consume using a threat model the threat information you receive come at hand. So to produce, I would say, IOCs, you have a detection system, forensics tools, sandboxes, and so on and so forth. For exchanging this, you have only kind of like the threat intelligence / sharing platform such as MISP. And to use them, well, you have your SIEM, your EDR, your IDS, and so many acronyms of the cybersecurity zoo. Now, I would like to briefly touch on the challenges when doing this. So first is the human factor. We always fear to share, and we don't do enough of sharing, sadly. So fear is legitimate, and how to kind of combat fear is by kind of like construct like solid arguments, thinking about it carefully, but also kind of getting to know against your peers and partners in order to open up to them. The second risk I'm seeing here is data overclassification, because when you start sharing and you kind of like not really trusting your peers and partners, you tend to overclassify data, and you use, for example, the traffic light protocol, TLP-RED, which basically prevents them from doing anything useful with the data that you are sharing with them. This is like the famous secret squirrel club, like, you know, we are secret agents, this is very, very secret, etc. Think about it. Threat actors collaborate, give your data among the, you know, share the data among yourself. If you're attacked, as long as you keep like the necessary data for others to protect themselves and maybe help you by giving you some feedback on the data, additional indicators of compromise that help you kind of like widen the scope of your investigation, you should not definitely use TNP Red. Also, the junior teams, it's normal that they take and not give, but they should see and construct capacity over time in order to start giving slowly but surely. Last but not least, we tend to invest more in these solutions, the famous major quadrant solution, instead of investing in talent, as hiring in nurturing talent. I have 20 years of experience in cybersecurity. Every time I had to choose between talent, human beings, and buying a commercial off-the-shelf solution, I'll go for talent, because talent will allow me to build, I would say, my threat sharing program or anything else using, for example, open source tools, create programs, scripts, etc., etc. And I capitalize thanks to that. The second, I would say, challenge is the software factor. There, we still have a problem in interoperability between different cybersecurity products when it comes to threat sharing. We still struggle with automation because our analysts sadly spend a lot of time kind of like mending cybersecurity, so copying and pasting data from one interface to the other instead of just like concentrating on the job. So there is still a kind of like progress to be made in this area. One thing that you should keep in mind also is when you're using tools such as EDRs and things on your endpoints and systems, etc., you should consider what telemetry data these tools share back with their creators, with the vendors, because they see a whole lot of things on the endpoints, for example, happening in real time. So you should have sufficient assurance and guarantees on what data they share and do not share. And last but not least, the paradox of choice. We have too many choices. So if you look, for example, at the RSA conference, you have so many security vendors, you get lost and miss the most. So this is where basically discussing with your peers and partners help identify the solution that could be good for you. And the last factor I would just want to mention is the commercial provider factor. Their commercial provider of threat data, they should progress on data quality, on contextualizing the data as well, because, for example, they might send you IOCs or indicators of compliance that are not related to your sector, not relevant to your threat actors, because it's not relevant to your threat model. And some, I would say, commercial provider just run honeypots or sandboxes and send you tons of raw unchecked IOCs. So, and this is not useful at all. And these providers mostly invent on IOCs and not enough on TTP. The problem there is that IOCs are very easy to use, but very brittle because they have a short shelf life, as attackers can change domain names, IP addresses, hashes fairly easily. TTPs, techniques, tactics, and procedures, on the other side, on the other hand, are more difficult to create, but resilient because attackers have a hard time changing them. If you are using a specific technique to move, for example, from one machine to the other, it's very hard for them to kind of come with a new technique because you are used to that, etc. And yeah, it takes some time for them to adapt. And again, there we have the paradox of choice. Many choices, no clear way to choose. And again, your peers and partners can help in that area in kind of identifying collectively the commercial provider you should go to instead of others. And last part of my presentation is the outlook for the dream. I just want to briefly mention, and I think this is the direction we should all collectively go to, hopefully sooner than later. Because, as I said, the threat landscape is worrisome, and with new, I would say, challenges we have to face, such as cloud, such as IoT and OT, for example, we will have problems. And this is the clearinghouse concept. So the clearinghouse is kind of like you should kind of link that to the certificate authority model, but with fewer entities and more stringent controls. We certainly don't want to end up with another digital notary, and they would play a role in kind of like being a proxy of trust, because you cannot know everybody there, you cannot know all your peers, you cannot know all your partners, you cannot know all the communities, cyber communities out there from which you can get valuable data that help you defend yourself, and which you could share data that can help defend themselves. So the clearinghouse could be, for example, your national CSIRT, or it could be kind of like something that you collectively construct as TSOs and DSOs in order to kind of like gather threat data in a central way, collect it, curate it for quality, and exchange it according to the sender, I would say, information or the sender kind of like requirements. For example, you want to share data, but you want to stay anonymous. So the clearinghouse can take the data and anonymize you and then share it with whomever you want it to share. So this is just food for thought to think about for the future. And with that, I would like to thank you for the opportunity to speak here. And I hope you learned one thing or two. So I don't know if we have time for a question, Roberto. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Assad. I hope your dream comes true, but you are in the best spot to make it come through. And this has been an outstanding presentation that you offer to us, and it is a very deep and an interesting insight. You have got 3 questions, but we are running out of time, and we committed to keep a precise timing. The Secretariat will forward you the questions from Sofia Tsekeridou and Michael Young, and one more that is not identified. And you will please answer these people privately, because it is quite interesting. And if you have a blog, a public page where you share these views, please, this is the place to tell everybody, over 200 people that are very much interested, probably in what you have just said. So we must unfortunately move on. I look forward to having the opportunity for a wider conversation with you and with EDSO and ENTSO-E on these same subject. So now let me pass the floor to another very interesting counterpart of what has been just said. Somebody experimenting every day the necessity, and not only the necessity, sometimes the limit or the progress of cybersecurity. So let me invite Jose Correa, whom is the head of cybersecurity at Iberdrola Networks. Iberdrola has got a master plan preparing for NIS, and Jose will share with us the boundaries of this master plan and the NIS issue. And please, Jose, the floor is yours. Keep it not as short as possible, but as short as decent you can. Okay, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Hello to all, and thanks for this opportunity. I will try to adjust to the time that is allowed. My name is Jose Correa. As indicated, I'm responsible for cyber for global networks in Iberdrola. You could pass to the next slide, please. The previous one, sorry. Okay, just, well, for those who doesn't know Iberdrola, I'm from networks. We are operating in 4 countries, in Spain, in UK, in US, and in Brazil. You can see there the number of customers we have. The difference in countries, I would say that in UK, in addition to distribution, we have transmission, and also in US. In US, we have also gas, and the unbundling situation is very different. In US and Brazil, the Americas continent, there is not such a strong, strict unbundling like in Europe, and that leads to different solutions. So for all these countries, we are in networks deploying a very ambitious digital plan to cope with all the challenges we have for the future DSOs. And all that deployment really needs a lot of cybersecurity, because we are putting connectivity downstream in all our networks. Next, please. In our plan, we cannot do the plan just networks, but there is in Iberdrola a hierarchy of cybersecurity and a complete coverage of all the business and corporate areas. We are organized in 3 defense lines. The first one are the businesses, the corporate functions, IT, the first defense line. We are the risk owners, and we implement the security. We have the budgets for cybersecurity. The second defense line is the corporate bodies and the risk management, so that we have the overall governance with the overall rules that apply to all countries and businesses, global intelligence, supervision and reporting. And finally, the third level, the third defense line is the internal audit, independent of the previous two, and that should guarantee the compliance of all the activities. The first and second defense line are connected to the Global Cybersecurity Committee. If you go to the next slide. This is the Global Cybersecurity Committee, where, as you can see, we are all represented, the businesses in the right part, networks, that's me, the cybersecurity organizations of the different countries in the left part, and the corporate functions in the bottom part. And there is a replica of this organization in every country and subjected to the global main committee. It's a shared responsibility between all of us. We understand that a big utility needs to distribute responsibilities of cyber in the different areas, because the areas are very different one from another. You can compare a corporate functions like legal services, human resources with networks, for instance. But there has to be a global coordination. We go for security and privacy by design, as was mentioned before. That is critical. We try to establish standards and global rules. We have collaboration mechanisms, metrics, and an important target is the awareness of all employees. Next, please. And having this coordination, however, we have to have a clear segmentation of our network. Everything is connected, but the connections have to be obviously supervised. On the top, you have the corporate part, the personal PC, corporate applications, big business applications, the information itself. We have the operational technologies in networks, generation, renewables, the cloud applications and mobility that are growing. So we concentrate in the operational technologies there. And I would say that mobility and cloud is starting to be has a bigger penetration each day. And there is a connection between the two worlds, the IT and the operational technologies via this cloud and mobility. So it's an aspect to watch. Okay, so our plan has concentrated within all these frameworks that I commented in the operational technologies areas. We go to the next one. And as philosophy to solve a big problem, because you all know what is a distribution or transmission utility, we have split the problem in 4. One is AMI, the other is telco, the other is substation and automation, and the other is real-time systems and centralized cybersecurity solutions. The cybersecurity to all of them obviously is horizontal, but each one has its own characteristics, and therefore the solutions that we have to apply can differ. The suppliers are different. If you look to the AMI, we go to the customer premises outside of our premises, out of control. For instance, the numbers are huge when we talk about meters. We have our own telcos. In substations, the big issue is the legacy substations. We have equipment, I don't know, 20 years old, and security is a challenge. We have to look to work around measures and so. And then the real-time systems, which are very much as the big subject of attack. So this is the arrangement to prepare the plan, how to target it. And then we look also, this is what are we protecting, but how? And to look to the how, we have looked to frameworks. Why a framework? Because as engineers, we concentrate too much by our nature in protection, in identification of the assets. But let's say that we tend to forget detection, because doesn't give in OT, where the attacks are not so many, I would say, all detection, all what is a response under cyber attacks. We have not have to do that before in the OT area. Therefore, we try to forget that, and also governance, a number of metrics and so. So frameworks are there to give a holistic coverage of everything, and that's why they are very, very valuable. If we go to the next one, please. And for the plan, we have a look of what was as requirements to our regulators and what we could implement. So obviously, it is very important to give confidence to our regulators on our cybersecurity maturity and approach. However, the issue with these frameworks is that they are different in each country. Here in Spain, we have the LPIC, that is a transposition of a former regulation. Now we are waiting for NIST transposition. In UK, we have the CAF, which is transposed by Ofgem, but Ofgem also is generating more controls, I would say. In US, we have NERCIP, and in Brazil, the Operador Nacional del Sistema Eléctrico is launching a new regulation together with ANEL, and it will be a fourth one. Although what will be the transposition in Spain and UK will be very, very similar, there will be always some differences. And we wanted something stable. So we selected the NIST framework, which we identified that although we cannot assure automatic compliance to what the regulators are asking, it is not far away to do that compliance. Needs some effort, but can be done relatively easy. If we go to the next one. Okay, so why we selected the NIST framework? As you can see, the NIST is very much, well, it is at the end is similar to NIST: identify, protect, detect, response, and recover. Very natural. The life cycle of an attack. Let's say first I have to know what I have to protect. If I have not protect, I have to detect, and if I have not detect, and I have to respond, and I have to recover. And if you go to the different categories below there, they are very specific. And the good thing is that the technical people can understand them well. And cybersecurity is not a duty of the cybersecurity departments, that it is, but also of the technical people. So they have to align to a framework that they can understand. So this has proven to be appropriate. It's accepted by all countries. Actually, in US, there is the debate whether NERCIP is not covering sufficiently all the requirements for cyber, and NIST has a wider coverage, so even the acceptance is better. And as I said before, NIST can be aligned with NIST quite easily. Okay, next one, please. Looking to the NIST itself, you will see we are concentrating in the left part, the essential service providers, and the 4 areas of NIS are similar. Risk management can be parallelized with identify in NIS, system defense with protection, detecting is detection, and the impact is response and recovery in the NIS area. So all this is consistent. So having identified the assets to be protected, having selected a framework, then we launched the plan. Next slide, please. Okay. The overall objective, achieve a sufficient cybersecurity maturity level in networks in all countries, compliant with our local regulatory frameworks, and maximizing the synergies among countries in its implementation. The globality of this approach makes sense because the threats obviously are global. Anything can happen anywhere and propagates along the globe. Cyber technology is also global, and the assets are very similar. We have different suppliers, models, but at the end are very similar. The reference frameworks are not as different as to avoid this globalization. They have differences, but having a solid niche base, you can respond to them with some additional effort. And we go for cost efficiency and for excellence in by sharing the best practices of the different countries. Next one. Just 2 slides. I will finish quite soon. Okay, this is the approach. We did a lot of information gathering and a gap analysis, looking to what we have, to the NIST framework, also looking to the regulations and other frameworks like COVID, IEC, ISO. And from that, we get the 4 countries action plan, which is now being deployed. We started last year in summer, more or less, and we expected to end by 2023. This will never finish, but at least we have a horizon with a maturity level intended at the end of that. And just the next slide. Well, as conclusions, well, maybe the last sentence is the stronger one, but I would say that in parallel to this, we are complying with the local frameworks in Spain with LPIC, which is focused in the very critical assets, and the new regulation, the NIST transposition, is awaited. There are already working groups for that. In UK, the CAF, we already did a self-assessment as mandated last year, and now we have the plan to comply to the many different requirements of CAF. We did the alignment of NIST to CAF because we were obliged to align the plan for OFGEN with our internal work. And I would say that at the higher level of the hierarchy of categories, they are aligned very easy. The more you go below to the details, they are more different. So it's not a one-to-one parallel connection. And finally, my last message, for sure, all of you are having similar experiences. To implement cybersecurity at this wider scale is a huge effort. It requires many organizations to participate, affects all our install base. We cannot forget anything. And sometimes we find that justification of the requirement, the resources is not easy because it is exceeding what we are used to, and it is not so visible to the top management, although the motivation is there. So as last sentence, having regulation promoting cybersecurity is a great aid because that helps really to have the whole company betting for this, especially in this context of very ambitious digital plans for the future. So that was it. Thank you very much.
Jose, thank to you. It was very clear. It was a very good example of how a big network company tackles the reality concerning cybersecurity in a very structured and systematic approach. And I think that all the members of DG Energy and the Commission at large that are in this conference did take a view of what you have said, especially of the role of a structured and very timely legislation that should go on with the progress that are implemented by enterprises. There is one question for you. 5.5 seconds. It is, explain why do you think a single attacked DSO will produce a cascading effect on our OT systems if they are not interconnected? This is coming from Arslan Brömme, is a National Information Security Officer in Germany for the colleagues of Vattenfall.
Okay. Well, I would say depends on the risk of propagation. Really, if there is like the Ukrainian attack, there is a target attack to a DSO just entering through a back door to the system of the DSO, the propagation of that is unlikely to happen. It's not possible. That will be just an attack to that DSO. The problem we are seeing, and we suffer, WannaCry and many other ransomware, the propagation of the seed for the attack, this sometimes goes everywhere. So when the attacker is putting the seed to prepare the attack, to open doors, whatever, that typically is launched everywhere. And sometimes the attacker wants to attack an utility, any utility. So they launch it everywhere. And in this utility where the backdoor is open because of some not complete protection, whatever, they can launch the attack. But just an attack to a DSO targeted to propagate to another, obviously is not. I don't see that risk as such.
Thank you very much, Jose. And we have got another question. Unfortunately, came in too late. Is from Sofia Querido. You will answer that privately, Sofia. I hope that you are not offended by this, but Jose will answer you in private. Thank you very much, Jose. And let's move on to Nicolas Richet. Nicolas is the Chief Information Officer and Secretary of the Digital Committee of ENTSO-E. Is on the other side of the grid for us, the DSOs, an important partner in the evolution of the cybersecurity at large, especially as far as the physical and technical connections among our respective grids are concerned. Nicolas, you have got the floor, please.
Thank you very much, Roberto. Can you just confirm that you can hear me loud and clear?
We do.
Okay, great. Thank you. So good morning to everyone. I don't know if other presenters of today share this experience, but it happens that when you are to speak in some conferences, you wonder what on earth you can present to have any chance to provide some decent value to your audience. That doesn't happen too much when you have to deal with cybersecurity in general, and I can tell you that it was definitely not an issue to prepare for today's presentation, which is on 1 year after the previous conference, confirmations, findings, and expectations. If we can move to the next slide, please. So 2 years ago, for the first edition, the Secretary General of ENTSO-E did a presentation summarizing how cyber threats were evolving in parallel with the evolution of the energy sector. And somehow that was also commented by Guido earlier on. And then last year, next slide, please. I gave a presentation, and in line with the elements that were, you can click until we have all the graphics. Thank you. And one more, I think we should be good. And another one, fantastic. Thank you very much. In line with the elements that were introduced by Mrs. Sikoff earlier on regarding the specificities of our environment when it comes to cybersecurity, like massive and hybrid asset-based and real-time and cascading consequence chain. We further commented on the dramatic financial and societal impacts of large disruptions to the power system, and that given our activity and the essential role of electricity in our so-called developed economies, we system operators and more broadly all stakeholders of the energy sector are a target for all type of attackers, from the young nerd to the most sophisticated nation state-backed actors. The rest of the presentation was about what we were doing to face this situation. And then we come to this year. So going to next slide, please. Yeah, a confirmation. Some of you may have noticed a publication we did on our website, a public website, that the ENTSO-E had suffered from a successful cyber intrusion into its Office network. So it was easy to find some stuff to discuss with you today. If we go to next slide, this confirmation, and I've used here quotes that are quite classical in cybersecurity environment. The one from Robert Mueller, former FBI director, saying there are only two types of companies, those that have been hacked and those that will be. Or another one from Dmitry Alperovich, cybersecurity expert, former VP at McAfee. Only two types of companies, those that know they've been compromised and those that don't know. So I would say this happens now quite generally, but should definitely, must be in the mind of the key stakeholders of the power system. It's not about will it happen, is it, when will it happen, or even is it happening already? It's important also to focus on the who will attack and with which objective, because that will help you prepare relevant mitigation and contingency plans. If we go to next slide, again, the point here is to, you can click again, have in mind the elements that I tried to summarize in an earlier slide and the one from last year. It's the essential nature of the commodity we deal with, which is power, which is electricity. When I have my elevator speech to try to foster interest of even stakeholders that are not close to our industry, is to realize that, again, in our so-called developed economies, you have water on the tap because you have pumps pushing the water to the tap, and pumps work on electricity. So usually this is sufficient to let people realize that, okay, so we are talking serious stuff. By the way, for those who have a bit of spare time, not many of us, I fear, but anyway, if you don't know it already, this distracting lecture reading this book from 2-3 years ago, I reckon, or maybe 4, Blackout. Not so much interesting about the scenario it describes of a major cyber attack. One could argue whether it makes sense or not, but about the consequences of a major cyber attack on the electrical infrastructure. You see how in a couple of weeks you're back to Stone Age. So for key actors of our industry, cyber attack is a vital risk that will turn one day into an issue for all of us. And again, it will happen once and it will happen again. If we move to next slide. At that point, I want to make state a little message. Hackers used to sometimes benefit from a somehow positive image. The smart nerd, gentle type of anarchist, smooth anarchist, and so on. And the most senior of us may remember this very 1980s movie called War Games, featuring a high school nerd messing up by mistake with a US military supercomputer, but then saving mankind from a thermonuclear holocaust. Well, sorry for Hollywood, but hacking is no fun. Cybercrime is crime. Cyber criminals must be treated accordingly. Suffice it to see, for example, the recent event that affected a hospital in Germany. Now, of course, this becomes even more complex to handle when it is state-backed, and their cooperation must extend, I reckon, as necessary, because it is about protecting a vital infrastructure. And this is this sometimes can bring us into the most complex geopolitics, and it's not about just us, the system operators, being on transmission, distribution, and our colleagues of the electricity value chain to deal with. We need also to cooperate more broadly with other type of authorities, I believe. If we go to next slide, so what follows is not best practices, it's not lessons learned, it's really and genuinely humble feedbacks and thoughts to hopefully food for thought for you, just meant to maybe give you some elements of reflection and see whether it could or could not be of use of you, or whether you would have done like us, or definitely not, because maybe you could consider we did wrong. So what's in you? What's in for you about what we have had to face? It's not an easy one to address. A short answer would be to just make my very good colleague Saad Kadi presentation your bedside book, because some elements I will introduce now are definitely in his presentation, which is a brilliant one. So yeah, definitely recommend it to another bedside book besides the one I introduced before. So not an easy one to address in terms of what's in for you, because what should I share? What can I share? What must I share? Again, this has been brilliantly touched upon by my colleague Saad. Just one note here on the more legal aspect of things. I've had already the opportunity to share with the people of DGNR and in various conferences the need for some sort of framework to progressively clarify this topic. Because a challenge we are faced with is that the individuals that have to deal with incidents and so on are primarily bound by their national regulations that are not yet consistent among each other. So indeed, the various initiative with NIS, and now again, as introduced by Mrs. Sikov and others, the effort we contribute to with other colleagues on the network code for cybersecurity in our energy sector are definitely moves in the right direction. But it's still a journey to go, and we need also to remember that our power systems, the system of interconnected power systems, is not only limited to European Union, and therefore to whatever legal framework we can establish within this perimeter, but it goes beyond to non-EU countries that have or don't have strong alignment on the most obvious legal frameworks that are established in the European Union. So this is really still a big topic. So this being said, even being cautious as I may need to be, there is a lot to say, and this is what I'm going to take you through now. So next slide, please. So first, some facts about this attack we had to face. First, how was it identified? Well, it was first spotted by witnessing traffic originating from an ENTSO-E secretariat. So the secretariat is the operational entity serving the association. So from an ENTSO-E secretariat registered IP address to an external server suspected to be a so-called control and command server of a state-sponsored threat actor. And without getting into the details, here at play has definitely been what Saad mentioned as important in terms of necessary and very useful cooperations among organizations. The analysis that was made proved, as much as it is possible to prove such things, but from the IOCs, so the indicators of compromise, and the TTP, so again referred to Saad's presentation, and the techniques, tactics, and procedures that were found led to confirm that this attack was of APT, advanced persistent threat nature. So in current language, very likely to come from a state-backed actor. In terms of the perimeter that was compromised, so it was the Secretariat Office network. At the moment of the analysis of the incident, no identification of pivoting or extending this attack beyond this perimeter was found, and indeed further thorough investigation was made by the TSOs and regional security coordinators. And this, again, as much as you can confirm those kind of things, have also landed on not finding any sign of pivoting of the attack we were exposed to beyond this perimeter. If we go to next slide, so what I wanted to share with you is, you know, those famous presentation, you have some day in the life of something. So the first day of an attacked organization, what does it look like? And I put on the right the picture of the bunny from the Lewis Carroll tale, Alice in Wonderland, and which says, the hurrier I go, the behinder I get. And that can be the feeling in the first moments, of course, when you realize you are under attack. So here I'm sharing again what we did, and food for thought for you to decide whether it was good moves, not good moves, if you would do the same thing in your environment or not. But some elements about the initial decision process that we went through in the detection and analysis phase, and trying to prepare for then containment and eradication phases. So at that moment, you need to first look at how to limit the damage and stop the attacker from further penetrating your system. Because of course you want to limit the risk of the organization. Now, as is pictured on the right, from a very good document that is published by the Cybersecurity Center in Belgium, the CCB, that runs the Belgium CERT, Computer Emergency Response Team. You have this dilemma: should I disconnect or should I watch and learn? Should I disconnect, by the way, is not even an obvious point. What means pulling the plug? Is it cutting external connections? Is it shutting down servers? Is it asking your users to stop relying on any sort of IT support? And again, balancing that against first keep something running so that you can still support the operations of your users. And also watch and learn, very important in order to gather evidences to properly characterize the attack and thus have the most relevant possible eradication and recovery actions to follow. Incidentally, when you balance all this, and again, I don't think there is any one size fits all solution to that. It's really an ad hoc decision. It is about delaying containment to watch and learn, but then possibly open possibility to the attacker to escalate privileges or compromise other systems. But also, again, you want to understand what is happening and also have in mind that some attacks are planned to cause additional damage if you start containing without putting some specific mitigations in place. So you need to go fast, but you need to think about it. And of course, in our industry and in our role at ENTSO-E, a particular topic of attention is to establish a hierarchy of risk so as to make sure that at any point, any decision you take will protect the most sensitive operations of our community, which is about keeping the lights on. So if we go to the next slide, please. Some of our cooking recipes. And again, it's our cooking recipes, not intending to say these are the cooking recipes. Well, first, the good thing is that you don't have to reinvent the wheel. I reckon you can rely on fundamentals of security and crisis management. There are thousands of books and documents about that. So here are just a few snapshots again. So one is identify the need to know. And here again, there's a balance to be found. Again, I refer to the presentation of Saad. And to define this need to know, which is a classical security principle, who should be in the loop of information at any given point in time, what is at stake, how far has the attacker penetrated, and therefore who must be informed. You can add to that, unfortunately, you need to be a bit also paranoid. Who can I trust? At the beginning, you don't know whether there had been maybe internal contributions to the attack or not. So you always need to be thinking about who do I need to trust, and can I trust that person? Second very important element, of course, is to establish your response team. This response team must have very clear roles inside. You must trust, you must empower the people that will be running those roles. But it's not like also by empowering, you should go as far as letting anyone feel alone at any time. Again, you are under very stressful moments, and you want to create the conditions for people to be able to focus, but also handle stress. You need to protect your response team from disturbances. Because of course, even if you limit the diffusion of information in the first hours, you need to provide some information to your key stakeholders, and you will be getting also, because these stakeholders will be under stress also, questions, comments of all sorts, and you cannot let your team be overwhelmed by external disturbances. And you need to prepare and manage your team for a long effort. This is not a sprint. This is not a one-day effort. It's going to be a not only many week, but many months effort. It's long distance running, so you need to work on that and make sure you can enable your team to withstand the effort over a very long period. I would like here to add an additional trick. Your IT professionals, and maybe you yourself, will feel bad. You know, you don't get under attack and say, okay, yeah, business as usual. It has a personal feeling in it. And you need to help your team turn that into a positive, constructive stress. Maybe if you have lost a battle, but you have not lost the war, and the war is the thing you want to win. A third point, I may just, if you can just go back just one slide, please, is resist the temptation to go for redemption or lonely hero. You cannot solve this alone or alone with your team. You need to be always very clear about what you can handle and versus what you need to get help on. You need to identify very early who can help you, and you need to alternate between rush period with your team and step back moments, hence the logo I've put on the right, and keep calm and stay back, protect your team. And here I want to emphasize and thank the support we got from the two certs we have been working with in this rush versus or alternating between rush and step back, because we have worked very closely with both the CERT Belgium and the colleagues of CERT EU, the team of Saad. And then later on, we had, of course, when we moved into containment, eradication, and recovery, also support from outside, but with the same logic, to be able to have people help you step back, to be able to compare approaches and recommendations, so as to always be able to have a cold look at things as much as possible. And an element which you want also to put in that is avoid combining a cyber incident situation with a facility move and a pandemic. But on that one, we failed because we had also facility move and a pandemic to face. So my IT colleagues will know that this is certainly a very interesting period to be in. I see Roberto on the screen, so I will speed up for the last bits. Next slide, please. But I know the material will be distributed. Facing an incident is just the start of the journey. Do not overlook the importance of post-incident activity. And on that, we will be using the elements that have been introduced briefly by Katarina Sikov. This work we have done thanks to a grant of the under the Connecting European Facilities. And thank you for that. We are already using outcomes of this work. Oh, and by the way, under Atom, the journey starts with the preparation for the incident. Now, again, it will happen, so be ready for it, even if there will be surprises. I will not get back to the equation that was presented by Guido regarding digitization, cybersecurity. It's very frustrating, but yes, we need to put money into cybersecurity. It goes along with the investment in digitization. Regulatory work, cooperation, essential. I think all of you touch upon, so I will not go beyond that. And the few examples I've mentioned with the CEF work, with the DGNR, and with the work with the two certs. Bear in mind, again, European power system is larger than European Union. Kirchhoff's law don't care about political treaties. The good news is, and I would like to finish on that one, is that we in Europe have all what it takes to develop world-class actors and capabilities in cybersecurity. So since we are forced to deal with that topic, let's master it to protect ourselves and also allow some of our European actors to make business out of it to protect others. Voilà. Thank you, Roberto.
Hold on. There we are. Nicola, thank you very much, especially for your last message. I have been among your key stakeholders, so to say, and so we were very sympathetic in living alongside you the draft that you had. Thank you for the transparency and the humbleness with which you illustrated this, and in my opinion was not exactly abiding to the Lewis Carroll bunny statement, but it was quite a leap forward for the operators in the sector, your reaction to this cyber attack.
Thank you, Roberto.
Hazelnut reply for a very concentrated question that we have got from Rainer Lütkhus among our public. We are about to witness the EU Commission that will review the NIS directive. One message of expectation towards that process.
Thank you for the question. Yeah, it's a tricky one. There was so much on the wish list. But again, when it comes to regulation, I think it's about helping us define trust and pave the way to enable to exchange information in a more and more seamless manner, knowing who we can exchange this information with. Because trust and exchange of information are essential when it comes to fighting against this crime. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Nicola. That was clear enough. I think that Rainer, if unsatisfied, can write directly to Nicolas, whom is easily reachable at ENTSO-E. Thank you for your contribution. And now let me give the floor to Maarten Heuwe. Maarten is the Director of Technology, ENTSO-E. ENTSO-E, whose founder is also around this conference, Anjo's neck, and he will be very much one of the top characters in the next conference on the 21st. And I invite you once more to follow it and register for that one as well. as I said, Martins is going to talk us about the vulnerability in the distributed energy resources infrastructure can be exploited to disrupt electricity supply. Before giving him the floor, I would like to thank you for attendance. I will pass for the conclusion to Juan Marco. Juan is the principal at EDSO, and technically he is number 2 in the secretariat, and he is our technologist and our most competent guy in this respect. Is the guy following the cybersecurity network codes for us, is the guy following the advanced technologies as well, along with our project and technology department. So thank you very much for attendance. There will be a switch of faces for the conclusions. And please, Martin, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you. So welcome everyone. So in this talk, I want to talk about the cybersecurity risk to distributed energy resources, or DER. Next slide. So as we saw, I mean, because of the energy transition and the climate goals that the EU has, there's a lot more renewable energy being deployed in the grid, so solar power, wind power, and a lot of this power is being deployed in distributed energy resources, so smaller installations scattered throughout the grid. As Mr. Stemfeld said at the start, about 90% of the renewables is connected to the distribution grid, and you can also see it in this graph from Solar Power Europe. So this graph shows how solar power is divided over different segments, so different sizes of installations. And if you take, for instance, Germany, which has about 46 gigawatts installed of solar power, you see that more than half of it is in the commercial and residential segment. So in installations that have a capacity or a power capacity of less than 250 kilowatts. So really smaller installations. So it's more than 20 gigawatts in these small installations. And that's relevant for cybersecurity because these small installations are not managed or owned by the traditional utilities. So they're owned by consumers, by different businesses, and they're operated, for instance, by installers or manufacturers. So you get new parties involved in the grid, and that also means that new parties may actually become critical infrastructures. Next slide. So we see that in DR, other parties become critical for the cybersecurity of the grid. And for us, we consider that any party that controls a lot of power actually is a critical infrastructure for grid stability. And the reason is that if you have a sudden loss of power, so either demand or supply, it creates balancing issues. So TSOs need to continuously balance demand and supply in the grid. And if suddenly, say, a lot of supply drops out, they need to compensate that somehow by raising demand or reducing supply. If it's too much that's being reduced, they get to run into trouble, and you can actually get power outages. And one example is the power outage we saw in August last year in the UK. So it was about 1 million people were without power for 45 minutes. Next slide. And what actually happened there is that two large plants actually dropped out. So there was a wind farm of about 800 megawatts that dropped out, and a gas plant of 700 megawatts that dropped out, and suddenly sort of 1.5 gigawatts of power was gone. The transmission system operators saw the frequency fall, and to compensate for this, they started to turn off customers to get the balance back, and this caused the blackout. So this is what can happen if a lot of demand or supply suddenly drops out. Now, how much is a lot of power for a critical infrastructure? So generally, the continental grid in Europe is designed to handle maybe drops of 3 gigawatts. So if some party goes over this threshold of 3 gigawatts, definitely they would be considered a critical infrastructure. But also in some sort of difficult situations, smaller drops can already cause problems. So generally, we think that parties already in the order of magnitude of hundreds of megawatts would already be critical to grid stability. Now, if you look at DR, what kind of parties would then actually become critical? So I'll give two examples. So the first example is the manufacturer of PV inverters. So next slide. So we did some preliminary testing on 3 different PV inverters used in, let's say, at homes or smaller businesses. The goal was to prepare a demo. We actually worked for several weeks on this. We didn't manage to get a very neat demo, and I'll explain to you why. So what we saw with the inverters we had is that they all start to connect back to the service manufacturer. So if you have one at home, you probably know. So the inverter is typically connected to your home Wi-Fi network, and then it connects over the internet to some server of the manufacturer of the inverter, and you can then use, for instance, an app on your phone to access the same servers and see your how much power you've generated with your solar panels. The difficulty is what we also saw is that some of the apps actually allow you to remotely switch off the inverter. So either directly or indirectly by setting some settings, there's a risk that from this app you can remotely switch it. But that also means that the servers can remotely switch off. And if these servers, for instance, would get hacked, the server manufacturer, they would actually possibly be able to switch off all connected solar panels through this connected to inverters manufacturer. And that could cause a major issue, a major drop of power and possibly a blackout. So this is why we think manufacturers are critical infrastructure if they control enough of these panels remotely. The difficulty in making demo of this is that the risk is not so much in inverters, which are sort of quite simple device, only connecting back to the server and quite difficult to reach. The main risk is in the server to manufacturer, which unfortunately we could not really test or make a demo out of. Another interesting thing is a link to supply chain security, as mentioned in the keynote. Next slide. So we see actually a lot of the manufacturers are, say, non-EU parties. So this is the largest PV inverter manufacturers by megawatt in 2019. This is globally, but I think Europe is quite similar. And you see a lot of outside of EU parties, for instance, Chinese, American parties, part of this. And if you then want to secure the grid, you become dependent on these parties, and you also need to somehow control their cybersecurity. And for instance, one salient example is that the biggest manufacturer listed here, Huawei. I think in some member states there's quite some concern about Huawei getting a major role in a critical infrastructure for 5G. But here you see that it's quite likely that Huawei is already part of critical infrastructure, already sort of a critical infrastructure operator through the electricity grid and the inverters that they can control. So this is the first example, the PV manufacturers. The second example is the installers of commercial PV and wind parks. Next slide. So we see that for the larger installations, the inverters are not sort of controlled by an app, but you have sort of a central control of the inverters that is actually also remotely manageable, but that needs to be configured by the installer. And then it becomes very critical first that the installer configures the equipment securely. So we also did some testing on these equipments. We found already hundreds of the same inverters that we tested online. And we also expect a lot of them have default passwords. So if you look at them, this is an excerpt from the installation menu. You see the default password is set to change me. That needs to be manually changed, and experience from other domains shows that a lot of people just don't do this. So there's possibly already a large install base with default passwords, and others may actually use simple passwords or reuse passwords within systems. So it's really critical that these systems are, say, use secure passwords, are updated and have secure communication. So that's one responsibility to the installers. The other responsibility that we see is that they need to secure their systems for remote maintenance. So often after they've installed the panel, they keep remote maintenance to monitor for problems and maybe remotely fix some issues. And that could mean that, say, an engineer with a laptop working for such an installer has access to maybe tens or hundreds of different locations and can then from his laptop actually potentially switch off these installations. So if his laptop then, for instance, would get hacked, you would have a major problem with that from the one laptop you can switch off a lot of power and again cause a blackout. So it's also important that the installers properly secure their IT infrastructure, their laptops, their servers, everything that they use to remotely maintain these systems. And again, these are two examples. There may be other parties, possibly aggregators, parties in the flexibility market. There's many different parties that may now get involved in the stability of the electricity grid. And so to summarize, what we see now is that the cybersecurity of the electricity grid no longer just depends on the traditional utilities, so the DSOs, TSOs, larger generators, but also a lot of new parties entering the market, possibly smaller parties. And from the utility side, we see that's very important to work with these new parties, so to help them to make sure that they reach the same level of cybersecurity as the traditional utilities. And we are working, for instance, at the ENTSO-E now with Solar Europe and Wind Europe to work with their members to help together improve our security. The other thing is that we strongly recommend that future regulation also covers these new parties. If you look at the current NES directive, it's strictly restricted to the traditional utilities, so DSOs, TSOs, large generators. We hope that the future network on cybersecurity and also possibly updated the NES directive also includes other parties, new parties that are becoming critical to the cybersecurity of the electricity grid. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. I will not introduce myself again as Roberto. I think that did an overwhelming explanation of what I do. And probably if you were in the first and second cyber grid events, you were able to see and talk to me. First of all, I would like to thank all of our speakers and of course our communication departments for what I believe a successful first part of this third cyber grid event. Since we are a little behind with the schedule, I will only highlight the common objectives defined by all of our speakers. I think that we all agree that we need to focus on protecting our energy systems based on current and future threats and risks. We need to create trust and transparency through collaboration and experience sharing, and to create a minimum level of defense with higher maturity, not only for system operators, but also for our users. I only have left to say goodbye to all of you, and I hope to see you for the second half of the Cyber Grid event on the 21st of basically in 2 weeks. So hope to see you all there. Thank you.